Imagine being invited somewhere not because you were wanted, not because you belonged, but because someone thought it would be funny to watch you walk in and realize you didn't. That was what happened to Zora Black. Zora was a plumber. She fixed burst pipes in mansions she could never afford to live in. She crawled under sinks while homeowners spoke over her, questioned her expertise, and acted surprised when she solved problems faster than anyone else they'd hired. Most days, people didn't look her in the eye. They looked at her uniform, the tool belt, the grease on her hands. To them, that told the whole story. So when the invitation came, it felt unreal. But before we go any further, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments, and let's continue. The envelope was thick, heavy, expensive, the kind of paper people like Zora never received. Inside was an invitation to a billionaire wedding, an event built for people who measured their worth in last names and net worths. But Zora knew immediately that something was wrong. This wasn't generosity. It wasn't kindness. It was a setup, because somewhere between the gold lettering and the black-tie dress code was a quiet message meant only for her. Come, so we can see you fail. And the irony was brutal. On that same night, in that same room, the woman they expected to laugh at, the one they planned to turn into entertainment, would step inside and freeze the entire celebration. What happened next wasn't loud. It wasn't messy, but it changed everything. The estate itself looked like a different planet. Crystal lights, designer gowns, men laughing with glasses worth more than Zora's monthly rent. Everyone moved like they belonged. Everyone except the woman who had been invited as a joke. From a distance, Josh Brent watched it all with a satisfied smile. He had inherited billions, attention, and a belief that people like Zora existed to remind him how far above everyone else he stood. Inviting her hadn't felt cruel to him. It had felt entertaining. What Josh didn't know, what no one at that wedding knew, was that Zora Black had once lived in a world where pressure decided championships, where her decisions moved millions, and where her name commanded silence the moment she spoke. And she hadn't forgotten any of it. Josh Brent stood in the center of his penthouse, surrounded by wedding planners, floral designers, and caterers competing for his approval. Everything had to be perfect. The champagne, vintage, naturally. The guest list, curated like an auction catalog. The venue, a historic estate that cost more to rent for one night than most people earned in a decade. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement. Josh, darling, his fiancée called from across the room, holding up two nearly identical fabric swatches. Ivory or cream for the napkins. He waved dismissively. Whatever costs more. His groomsmen laughed. One of them leaned in, lowering his voice. So, did you actually go through with it? Josh grinned. Oh, I went through with it. The plumber, another asked, eyes widening. The plumber, Josh confirmed, lifting his glass. Zora Black. Sent her a formal invitation. Black tie. The whole thing. The room erupted in laughter. You're joking. I'm dead serious. Can you imagine? Her showing up in, what, a rental dress? Work boots. Josh's smile turned sharp. Or better yet, she doesn't show at all. Either way, it's perfect. One of his friends clapped him on the shoulder. That's savage, man. I love it. Word spread quickly. Staff whispered in hallways. Guests texted each other, anticipating the moment. Some wondered if she'd actually come. Others hoped she would, just to see what would happen. Meanwhile, Zora sat alone in her small apartment, the invitation resting on the table in front of her. She'd read it a dozen times now. Each time, the weight of it felt heavier. This wasn't new. She'd spent years being underestimated, talked down to, dismissed. But this was different. This was deliberate humiliation, wrapped in expensive paper and sealed with gold wax. She could ignore it, throw it away, pretend it never happened. Or, a memory flashed, sharp and sudden. Paddocks filled with the roar of engines. A headset pressed to her ear. Her voice calm, authoritative, making split-second calls that determined podium finishes. The weight of a championship team trusting her completely. Karen's voice in her ear. Zora, talk to me. Her response, steady as steel. Box now. We're taking this. Zora's hand moved to the invitation. She didn't tear it. She didn't crumple it. She folded it carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Her voice was quiet, but certain. If they want a show, I'll give them truth. Zora stood and walked to her bedroom closet. In the far corner, buried beneath old jackets and forgotten shoes, sat a cardboard box she hadn't opened in 7 years. She pulled it out slowly, dust coating her fingertips. Once, Zora Black had been untouchable. She'd stood on pit walls where millions of dollars moved on her decisions, where drivers trusted her voice more than their own instincts, where team principals deferred to her calls because she was never wrong when it mattered most. Formula One wasn't just a sport. It was war at 200 miles per hour. And Zora had been a general. Box now, Lewis. We're going plan C. Zora, are you sure? Box. Now. 3 laps later, they'd won. Again. She'd been the only black woman to ever hold that position. The only woman, period, at that level for years. And she hadn't earned respect by asking for it. She'd earned it by being better, sharper, faster, unshakable under pressure that broke everyone else. Male engineers twice her age had learned to listen when she spoke. Drivers who dismissed her at first had learned to trust her completely. The paddock had been brutal, political, and unforgiving, but Zora had commanded it. Until the accident. Her fiancé, Marcus, had been a reserve driver. Talented. Ambitious. Her everything. The crash wasn't her fault. The data proved it. But the media needed someone to blame, and a woman in her position made an easy target. Headlines twisted facts. Rivals whispered. Sponsors pulled out. And Marcus, who'd survived, never forgave her for the call she'd made that put him in that car. The team stood by her. Publicly. But privately, the pressure mounted. Grief became scrutiny. Scrutiny became isolation. One morning, Zora walked away. No announcement. No goodbye. She disappeared into a life where no one knew her name and no one asked questions. From pit wall to pipes. Now, she opened the box. Inside were paddock passes, championship photos, her old credentials, a headset she'd once worn like armor. Proof of a woman who'd commanded empires. Proof she'd buried. Proof she was about to unearth. Wait, Zora Black isn't just a plumber. She was a Formula One mastermind who made championship-winning calls under pressure. Drop a comment if you didn't see that coming. Zora stared at her phone for 10 minutes before finally typing the message. Karen, it's Zora. I need your help. The response came in seconds. Address. Now. When Karen arrived an hour later, she didn't knock. She walked straight in, took one look at Zora standing in the middle of the small apartment, and stopped cold. 7 years, Karen said quietly. 7 years, and you just vanished. I had to. Karen crossed the room and pulled Zora into a fierce hug. When she stepped back, her expression had shifted, sharp, focused, strategic. Why now? Zora handed her the invitation. Karen read it once. Then again. Her jaw tightened. Who the hell is Josh Brent? A billionaire who thinks I'm entertainment. Karen set the invitation down carefully. He invited you to mock you. Yes. And you're going. Yes. Karen studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not warmly, but with the precision of someone who'd spent years navigating power dynamics in one of the world's most cutthroat industries. Karen had risen since Zora left. She was now a senior advisor to multiple racing teams, a consultant whose name carried weight in boardrooms and paddocks across 3 continents. She moved in circles where influence was currency. This isn't about clothes, Karen said. This is about presence. I know. Good. Because we're not going for revenge. We're going for reintroduction. Karen pulled out her phone. You're not walking into that wedding as a plumber. You're walking in as exactly who you are. I don't even know who that is anymore. Karen's gaze hardened. Yes, you do. You've just been hiding her. Over the next 3 days, Karen moved like a general. A designer arrived with dresses, elegant, powerful, nothing flashy. Authority, not apology, Karen instructed. They worked on posture. Zora had spent years making herself smaller. Now, Karen made her stand taller. Chin up. Shoulders back. You commanded pit walls. Act like it. Mental reset came last. Karen sat across from Zora and spoke plainly. You're not asking permission to be in that room. You belong there more than any of them. Zora exhaled slowly. You're not going as a plumber, Karen repeated. Then who am I going as? Karen smiled. A legend they forgot existed. The Belmont estate glowed like something out of a fairy tale, if fairy tales were built on oil money and generational wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, each one worth more than a house. The gardens had been transformed into an illuminated wonderland, with string lights woven through ancient oak trees and white roses lining every pathway. A string quartet played near the fountain. Champagne flowed from towers of crystal glasses. The air itself smelled expensive, imported florals and French perfume. Everyone who mattered was there. Tech moguls, hedge fund executives, politicians, celebrities whose faces appeared on magazine covers. They moved through the space like they owned it, because in a way, they did. This was their world, built for them, protected for them. Josh Brent stood at the center of it all, laughing loudly, his arm around his bride. He looked like a man who'd never doubted himself. Never had to. His tuxedo was custom. His watch cost 6 figures. His confidence was inherited. This is incredible, Josh, someone said, clinking glasses with him. Only the best, Josh replied, flashing that trademark grin. Near the bar, a group of guests huddled together, voices low but amused. Did he really invite a plumber? I heard she actually RSVP'd. No way she shows. God, I hope she does. Can you imagine? Laughter rippled through the group. Josh overheard and smiled to himself. Everything was going exactly as planned. The night was perfect. The guests were entertained. And soon, they'd have a story to tell for years. He raised his glass, basking in the applause, the attention, the control. This was his night, his stage, his moment. Then, from somewhere near the entrance, the music faltered. Just slightly. A violin missed a note. The cellist glanced toward the driveway. Conversations began to slow. Heads turned. A sleek black car rolled up the long driveway, moving with quiet certainty. No rush. No hesitation. It stopped directly in front of the entrance. The valet approached, hand extended. The car door opened, and everything changed. Zora stepped out of the car. Not tentatively, not apologetically. She stepped out like she'd been invited to command the room. The dress was emerald green, tailored, elegant, stunning without trying. Her hair was styled simply, pulled back to frame her face. No excessive jewelry. No desperate attempts to fit in. Just quiet, undeniable presence. She handed her clutch to the valet with a small nod and turned toward the entrance. The silence spread like a wave. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. The quartet kept playing, but no one was listening anymore. Everyone was staring. Who is that? Someone whispered. I don't know. She looks familiar? Zora walked. Not fast. Not slow. Each step deliberate, controlled, powerful. She didn't look nervous. She didn't look out of place. She looked like she belonged. Not here, but everywhere. Near the entrance, Josh's smile froze on his face. This wasn't what he'd expected. He'd expected awkwardness. Hesitation. A woman in an ill-fitting dress, eyes darting nervously, realizing too late that she'd walked into a trap. But this was something else entirely. Zora moved through the crowd like water parting around stone. Guests stepped aside without realizing they were doing it. Some stared openly. Others exchanged confused glances. That's the plumber, someone whispered, disbelief thick in their voice. That can't be her. Josh said she was. That is not a plumber. Josh's jaw tightened. His hand gripped his champagne glass harder. He looked at his groomsmen, searching for reassurance, for laughter, for confirmation that this was still his joke. But no one was laughing. Zora reached the main courtyard and stopped. She didn't search for approval, didn't scan the room anxiously. She simply stood there, elegant, controlled, untouchable. The room remained frozen. No explanation, no words, only presence. And in that silence, something shifted. The joke, whatever Josh had planned, whatever humiliation he'd designed, died before it could even begin. Because the woman standing before them wasn't someone to laugh at. She was someone to fear. Josh expected humiliation. He got dominance. Share this story with someone who deserves to see it. Then, Cutting through the silence, a voice rang out clear and certain. Zora Black. Heads whipped around. A woman stepped forward from the crowd, impeccably dressed, confident, her presence commanding immediate attention. Karen Way, former F1 team executive, current motorsport consultant, a name that carried weight in circles that mattered. She walked straight toward Zora, hand extended, smile genuine. "I didn't think you'd ever come back," Karen said, clasping Zora's hand warmly. "But I'm glad you did." Somewhere near the fountain, a man in his 60s straightened suddenly. His eyes widened. "Wait, Zora Black?" The Zora Black. Another guest, a woman who ran a global logistics firm, gasped softly. "From Apex Racing?" "The strategist?" someone else added, voice rising. "The one who called the Monaco upset?" The whispers multiplied, spread, accelerated. "She was legendary. I heard she disappeared after." "That's her." A former team owner pushed through the crowd, hand extended. "Miss Black, I tried to hire you 3 times. You were the best in the business." Zora nodded politely. "Thank you. We all wondered what happened to you," another voice added. "You just vanished." The crowd was no longer confused. They were awed, curious, respectful. These weren't people who impressed easily. But Zora Black, the woman who'd commanded million-dollar decisions under impossible pressure, who'd earned her place in one of the world's most elite, unforgiving industries, was someone they recognized, someone they respected. Josh stood frozen, champagne glass still in hand. His smile had vanished completely. He looked at his groomsmen, at the guests, at the whispers now spreading like wildfire. "Wait," one of his friends muttered. "That's the plumber?" "She's not a plumber," someone corrected sharply. "She's Zora Black." Another guest turned toward Josh, eyebrow raised. "You invited her as a joke?" Josh's face flushed. "I didn't." "That's Zora Black," another repeated, louder now, disapproval hardening their tone. "And you invited her here to mock her?" The judgment wasn't whispered anymore. It was spoken, directly, publicly. And Josh, surrounded by his own guests, suddenly realized the joke had never been on Zora. It had always been on him. The truth is out, and Josh just realized he invited a queen to mock her. Did you see that coming? Let us know in the comments below. Josh forced a laugh, waving his hand dismissively. "Look, this is all just a misunderstanding. I invited Zora because you thought it would be funny," Zora said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs like a blade. Josh's mouth opened, closed. "I know that's not. You invited me," Zora continued, her tone calm, measured, "because you saw someone you thought didn't belong in your world. Someone you could use for entertainment. Someone whose presence would make your guests feel superior." The crowd had gone completely silent now. "You looked at me and saw a plumber. And you decided that was the whole story." Josh's face reddened. "That's not fair. You were just reminding me of my place," Zora said evenly. "The way people have been doing my entire life." She turned slightly, addressing not just Josh, but everyone watching. "I've spent years being underestimated, talked over, dismissed. And for a long time, I let it happen because survival required me to keep my head down, to do the work and disappear." Her gaze swept the crowd, former colleagues, industry leaders, strangers who now knew her name. "But here's what people forget. Your job doesn't define your worth. Your current circumstances don't erase your past. And dignity isn't something you lose just because someone tries to take it from you." Someone in the crowd began to clap. Then another. Then more. The applause grew, genuine, respectful, powerful. Karen smiled, arms crossed, watching. Former teammates nodded in agreement. Even guests who'd never heard of Zora before tonight stood a little straighter, visibly moved. Josh stood alone now, his friends having quietly stepped back. His joke had collapsed, his cruelty exposed, and he hadn't been defeated with anger or insults or chaos. He'd been defeated with truth. Zora met his eyes one last time. "Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Brent. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten." She paused. "That I never needed your approval in the first place." Then she turned, calmly, and walked toward the exit. The crowd parted. No one laughed. No one whispered. They simply watched a queen leave. Zora walked through the estate gardens, heels clicking softly against the stone pathway. The string lights glowed above her. The music had resumed behind her, but quieter now, uncertain. Guests parted as she passed. Some nodded. Others watched in silence. A few looked like they wanted to speak, but didn't know what to say. Karen caught up to her near the valet stand, that knowing smile still on her face. "Mission accomplished," Karen said softly. Zora exhaled, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "I didn't come here for revenge." "I know," Karen replied. "But you got something better." As Zora waited for her car, people approached. Not to mock, not to question, to offer. A team principal handed her his card. "If you ever want to come back, we'd be honored." A motorsport consultant stepped forward. "I'm launching a new consultancy. I'd love to talk." An executive from a major racing organization extended her hand. "Your legacy never left, Ms. Black. We'd like to help you reclaim it." Zora accepted each card graciously, slipping them into her clutch. The valet brought her car around. Karen squeezed her hand once before stepping back. "You were always a queen, Zora. Tonight, you just reminded everyone else." Zora smiled, small, genuine, free. As she drove away from the estate, the lights fading in her rearview mirror, she thought about everything that had brought her here. The years of grief, the anonymity, the survival. She hadn't regained her power tonight. She'd simply remembered it had never left. The invitation had been meant to humiliate her, to prove she didn't belong, to make her small. But instead, it had done something Josh Brent never anticipated. It made her visible again. And once the world remembered Zora Black, really remembered her, there was no putting that light back in the box. She drove into the night, not as the woman they'd tried to mock, but as the woman she'd always been. Unstoppable. Zora walked in as the joke and walked out as the legend. Now tell me, should she return to Formula One or build something even bigger? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. Another video drops, same time tomorrow.